The first date was going perfectly until she lowered her eyes, pushed her untouched glass of lemonade away, and quietly told me that if I wanted to leave because she had 2 children, she would understand. What she didn't know was that I had spent most of my life believing people left when things became difficult, and at that moment, I realized I was being given a choice between becoming the kind of man who ran from someone's complicated past and becoming the kind of man who stayed long enough to understand it. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so our family and our community can continue sharing stories that remind us that love is sometimes found in the places we least expect. My name is Everett Collins, and at 38, I had become very comfortable with being alone. Not because I hated relationships, and not because I believed love was impossible, but because I had slowly convinced myself that peace was safer than disappointment. I worked as a restoration carpenter, repairing old houses that other people had given up on. There was something strangely comforting about taking something damaged and patiently bringing it back to life. A cracked wooden staircase, a faded cabinet, a broken window frame, none of those things bothered me. They simply needed time, patience, and someone willing to believe they could still become beautiful. People, however, felt different. People carried memories, fears, disappointments, and invisible scars, and I had spent years believing I didn't have the strength to carry someone else's. Then I met Laurel Bennett. We first connected through a local community volunteer event on a bright Saturday morning. I was helping repair picnic tables at a neighborhood park, while Laurel was organizing donated books for a small children's reading program. She had auburn hair tied loosely behind her head, a simple blue sweater, and an expression that made her look as though she was constantly thinking about 3 things at once. She wasn't the loudest person there, but whenever someone needed help, she was already moving toward them. When a little boy accidentally knocked over a box of books, Laurel didn't sigh or complain. She simply knelt down beside him, smiled, and started picking up the books as if nothing important had happened. I noticed the way she treated him before I noticed how beautiful she was. We ended up working beside each other for most of the morning. She teased me about measuring a picnic table twice before cutting a single piece of wood, and I teased her about alphabetizing children's books that were going to be thrown into a pile by excited kids within 5 minutes. Our conversation felt strangely easy. There was no pretending, no awkward silence, and no pressure to impress each other. Before we left, Laurel wrote her number on a small piece of paper and handed it to me. She hesitated for a second before smiling and telling me that she usually didn't give her number to men she met while covered in dust and sawdust. I told her that was probably because most men weren't lucky enough to meet her while covered in sawdust. She laughed, and I carried that laugh with me all the way home. 2 days later, I called her. We talked for almost 2 hours. I learned that she was 35, worked at a local elementary school, loved old bookstores, hated crowded restaurants, and had a weakness for lemon desserts. I also learned that she had 2 children, 8-year-old Milo and 6-year-old Ren. She told me about them casually, as though she didn't want their existence to become the first thing I thought about when I thought about her. But I could hear something underneath her words. Caution. Not embarrassment. Not shame. Caution. When I asked her if she wanted to have lunch with me the following weekend, there was a pause long enough for me to wonder if I had said something wrong. Then she agreed. She chose a small garden cafe where the tables sat beneath flowering trees. It was peaceful, bright, and filled with the smell of fresh bread and coffee. I arrived early because I was nervous, although I would never have admitted it. I had changed shirts 3 times that morning and spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to decide whether wearing a watch made me look confident or desperate. Then Laurel arrived. She walked through the garden entrance carrying a small handbag, and for a few seconds I forgot every clever sentence I had prepared. She smiled when she saw me, and that smile immediately made the nervousness disappear. We sat beneath a tree, and the conversation flowed naturally. She told me funny stories about her students. I told her about a customer who had accidentally painted an entire living room ceiling the wrong shade of gray and insisted it was intentional. We laughed until the people at the next table looked over. For the first hour, I didn't think about her children. I didn't think about her past. I didn't think about whether this could become something serious. I simply enjoyed being with her. There was something peaceful about Laurel. She listened carefully when I spoke. She didn't constantly check her phone. She remembered small details from our earlier conversations. When I mentioned that my father had taught me woodworking before he passed away, her expression softened, and she didn't offer one of those empty phrases people use when they don't know what to say. She simply let the silence exist for a moment. Then, almost without warning, the mood changed. Laurel looked toward the garden, took a slow breath, and folded her hands together on the table. She told me she needed to say something before we continued seeing each other. She explained that she had learned not to hide the difficult parts of her life just because she wanted someone to like her. She had 2 children, and they were her entire world. Their father had been absent for several years, and she had learned to build a life around responsibility, school schedules, doctor's appointments, grocery bills, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. She told me that dating as a mother was difficult because some men loved the idea of her until they realized that loving her meant respecting 2 little people who came before any romantic relationship. Then she looked directly at me and said that if I wanted to leave because she had 2 kids, she would understand. Something inside me cracked. Not because she had children. Not because I was suddenly afraid. It was because I recognized the look in her eyes. It was the look of someone preparing to be rejected before rejection had even happened. She wasn't asking me to promise her forever. She wasn't demanding that I become a father. She wasn't asking me to solve her life. She was simply protecting herself from another disappointment. I reached across the table and told her that having 2 children didn't make her less worthy of love. If anything, it told me that she had responsibilities and a heart big enough to keep going when life was difficult. I told her I wasn't there because I wanted a perfect story. I was there because I liked the woman sitting across from me. Laurel looked at me for a long time, and I could see tears gathering in her eyes. But what she didn't know was that my answer wasn't entirely fearless. On the drive home, I admitted to myself that I was scared. I had never been a parent. I had never dated someone with children. I had no idea where the boundaries were or what role I was supposed to play. I worried that I would make mistakes. I worried that the children might never accept me. I worried that I would become attached and eventually lose them if Laurel and I didn't work out. Most of all, I was afraid of becoming important to 2 children and then disappearing from their lives. Still, I called Laurel the next morning. Our relationship grew slowly. I didn't rush into her children's lives. Laurel was careful about that, and I respected her. We spent several weeks getting to know each other while the children remained separate from our relationship. I learned more about her past, and she learned more about mine. She discovered that I had spent years caring for my widowed grandmother before she passed away. I learned that after Laurel's marriage ended, she had worked 2 jobs for a period of time just to keep the children stable. She never complained about it. She simply described it as something that needed to be done. Eventually, the day came when Laurel believed I was ready to meet Milo and Wren. We met at a public botanical garden on a sunny afternoon. Laurel had warned me that Milo was shy around new people and Wren asked approximately 400 questions every hour. She was right about both. Milo stayed close to his mother, studying me with the serious expression of a tiny detective. Wren immediately asked me whether I knew how to climb trees, whether I liked pancakes, whether I had ever broken a bone, and whether I was good at drawing animals. I answered every question honestly. When she asked if I could draw a horse, I admitted that my horses looked like nervous dogs. She laughed so hard that Milo finally smiled. That small smile felt like a victory. Over the following months, I became part of their lives gradually. I never tried to replace their father. I never demanded to be called anything special. I simply became Everett. The man who helped Milo repair a broken bicycle chain. The man who brought Wren a new sketchbook after she filled the old one. The man who listened when Milo was upset about losing a school competition. The man who sat at the kitchen table helping with homework while Laurel prepared lunch. There were beautiful days, but there were difficult ones too. One afternoon, Milo became angry after I helped him fix his bicycle. He threw the wrench onto the ground and told me I wasn't his father. The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to leave. I wanted to protect myself from rejection. But then I remembered Laurel sitting across from me on that first date, already preparing for me to walk away. So I stayed. I told Milo that I didn't want to be his father. I already had a mother and father, and nobody could replace them. I simply wanted to be someone he could trust. He didn't respond immediately. He picked up the wrench and continued working. That evening, Laurel apologized for what had happened, but I told her there was nothing to apologize for. Milo had been honest. Children should be allowed to have complicated feelings. Love wasn't supposed to erase those feelings. It was supposed to make room for them. Months passed, and something unexpected happened. Milo started asking me to come to his school projects. Wren began saving her drawings for me. Laurel started laughing more. And I realized that the life I had once considered too complicated had somehow become the life I looked forward to every morning. Then came the hardest test. Laurel received an opportunity to move to another state for a better position at a school district that could provide her with significantly more financial stability. It was the kind of opportunity she couldn't easily ignore. But moving meant leaving behind the small community where the children had grown up, and it meant changing everything. Laurel was torn. She feared that if she chose the opportunity, she would lose me. She feared that if she stayed, she would regret sacrificing a better future for her children. I told her that I didn't want her to choose between me and her children. I told her that if the opportunity truly gave her children a better future, she should take it. Love should never become another burden a person had to carry. Laurel cried when she heard that. She told me she had spent years believing that anyone who entered her life would eventually ask her to choose between being a mother and being a woman. I told her she shouldn't have to choose. She deserved someone who understood that both parts of her belonged to the same person. In the end, Laurel didn't take the job immediately. Instead, she negotiated with her school district and found another position that offered better opportunities without forcing the children to leave everything familiar. It wasn't perfect, but it was right for them. A year after our first date, we returned to the same garden cafe. We sat beneath the same flowering tree. Laurel smiled and told me that she had almost canceled our first date because she was convinced I would eventually leave when I learned the truth about her life. I told her that she had misunderstood something important. Her children weren't a problem I had learned to tolerate. They were part of the family I had slowly grown to love. Milo was now comfortable enough to steal food from my plate without asking. Wren had become an enthusiastic artist who decorated every birthday card with drawings of the four of us. And Laurel no longer looked like someone waiting for the next person to walk away. She looked safe. That was the word I kept thinking about. Safe. Not because life had become perfect. It hadn't. There were still bills, arguments, difficult mornings, school problems, and days when everyone was exhausted. But love had stopped being a promise about avoiding hardship. It had become a decision to face hardship together. Years later, when I thought about that first date, I realized Laurel hadn't actually been asking whether I wanted to leave because she had 2 kids. She had been asking whether I was capable of seeing beyond the circumstances that frightened me. And the truth was, she had given me something too. She taught me that family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it is something you build patiently, one ordinary day at a time. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as a perfect beginning. Sometimes it arrives carrying responsibilities, old wounds, uncertainty, and two little hands waiting to discover whether you are someone who stays. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before you go, tell us in the comments what you believe the greatest lesson of this story is. Should we judge someone by the difficulties they carry, or should we take the time to understand the person underneath them? As for me, I learned something that changed the way I see love forever. The right person doesn't always arrive with an uncomplicated past. Sometimes they arrive with children, scars, responsibilities, and fears that make you question whether you are ready. But if you have the courage to stay, listen, forgive, and grow together, you may discover that what looked like a complicated life was actually the beginning of the family you never knew you were missing. Laurel once feared that her 2 children would be the reason I walked away. Instead, they became 2 of the greatest blessings I had ever known. And beneath that flowering tree, on the same table where she had once prepared herself for rejection, I finally understood that second chances aren't always about getting another chance at love. Sometimes they are about getting another chance to become the person you were always meant to be.